Hello and welcome, my ghouls and goblins, to the Halloween series on the Screen Queen. Hello and welcome back, my little ghouls and goblins, for my favorite time of the year, the Halloween series on the Screen Queen. And I am your host with the scares that care, Sami Parrish. So for our second episode, oh man, I had a right to rightfully scream for that one, because I had to think about it. This might be regarded as one of the scariest stories from Stephen King. Now, I would say take it with a grain of salt, because this is just the way that I've seen Stephen King's work be ranked in many different ways, because there's so many different ways to grade him. But if you had to tell me what is the scariest character from Stephen King's characters, it would have to be Pennywise. I mean, yes, there is the alcoholic writer that went into an isolated job with his family, knowing that their fate was going to be very terrifying. Or there's the other writer that got trapped in the snow by a crazed fan with a more psychological element. And both of those are scary in their own way. But both of these have human characters. With Pennywise not being a human character and is introduced as just evil, it kind of ranks a little bit higher when you think about the scariest creation Stephen King has ever made. But you have a sociopathic entity that preys on children. I think that kind of outranks the other alcoholic writers that end up having a horrible time or anything. Like, there's a reason why the original It series, despite its 90s showing, has lived for so long, because it took one of the scariest concepts that Stephen King has done and brought it to life. And then we got an updated, terrifying version. This is one of the purest, terrifying game sport. There's so many stories where children have unfortunately been the prime target, but this is different on such a level where you feel the fear is more isolated, making help absolutely impossible for these kids to get anything. There's a level of helplessness that you get with horror, and I think it captures the most out of it. And I'll admit, when I first saw it, I found I had a fear of clowns I did not know I had until then. When Andy Muschietti became the director for the It series, it was a big wonder if it can top what the 1990 did. Well, the series basically said, hold my beer, I'm about to make this more terrifying than the original. And in some perspective, both of these versions hold their own torch. But the newer version definitely has a lot more news than the older version does. It has been quite a divisive take on what is considered to be, I think, the strongest of the scariest characters in Stephen King's history. So grab your yellow raincoats and definitely stay away from the sewers, because we are covering it. So starting off the episode, I had to wonder, where did it come from? Like, the name. Because why would you call a clown It? I mean, it makes sense. It feels like a very childish way to have to describe what a threat is just by calling it It. So I did some digging. It gets its title from various B movies that had ambiguous things to sum up the monster, like the thing from outer space, them. Sometimes they come at night. Anything that's like a they, them, something, it gives it a little bit more definition of the unknown. As how are these kids supposed to explain it? So them saying it's like, oh, that sounds pretty on par. So we know where it got its name, but where did it get its inspiration from? And I looked that up and found that it is conceived from the idea of a Norwegian story tale called The Three Billy Goats Gruff. And that is a troll living under a bridge, and that eventually gave him the inspiration of wondering, well, what if it was living under a city? So can a performance be so strong that you can't look at someone the same way? Well, this was the case for Bill Skarsgård. When it first came out, no pun intended, that he was going to be playing Pennywise, there was, a little bit of, not apprehension, but how can you top Tim Curry? How? No, everyone knew it wasn't going to be the same, but no one was expecting that this was going to be a far different depiction of Pennywise that would never compare to Tim Curry, but became darker, that couldn't even be compared with having updated scares. I mean, then again, look at the Pennywise depicted on television. That is just for 1990, having to condense it down. When you get the big screen treatment, you can do whatever you want, which gives more of an advantage to making Pennywise scarier all the way through. So having it chapter 1 and 2, they upped the ante to give you something that you can't unsee. I had a hard time looking at the screen whenever he was on there, knowing they were going to go far. But because the performance of Pennywise was so strong, I feel Bill Skarsgård has a tough time being taken seriously. And it shows. Anytime I talk to my friends about other Bill Skarsgård movies, I even recommended one of them that's one of my personal favorites, Barbarian, and the response was, I can't watch it because it's got Pennywise in it. Even though he's literally not in a clown costume, the performance was so strong that no one can look at this guy outside of his clown makeup, an entirely different character, just because of Pennywise. Not even his brother has spared him from the fame of Pennywise and jokingly put on the old school Pennywise mask in front of him and flipping each other off because brothers. But after Pennywise, this led to a very prosperous career in the horror department. After Pennywise, Bill Skarsgård went on to star in the first season of Castle Rock, which is a Stephen King anthology universe series is what I would call it. And it's all thanks to him playing Pennywise. And then it led to other horror films coming through like Barbarian and then eventually Nosferatu. And after Nosferatu, Bill gave it the quits. He could not do it. And that's understandable. When you spend time as a character that thinks nothing except looking at Pennywise and Nosferatu, they're different species, but they're still one and the same when it comes to their motives. Like they are predator characters that go after human life, and that's what they live for, is taking human life. So yeah, I think I can understand why he wants to retire. Having to be in a mindset that gives such a depraved performance and unhinged, whatever he sacrificed, it was worth the sacrifice, but it's not worth a further sacrifice. To quote Jessica Lange from American Horror Story Asylum, if you stare at evil long enough, evil's gonna stare right back at you. For him to have to choose roles that no longer require him to go to a dark place, that's going him to put his mental health over that. Him having to say that Nosferatu was the darkest character he ever played, I believe it. If that's more than Pennywise, damn. So I want to do a little compare and contrast from the original TV miniseries to the movie remakes. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'd rather save some of those details for the actual covering of the It miniseries from television. But over the years since the It remake has aged a little bit, it's still new, but it's settled at this point. And then comparing to the research that I've done of the 1990 It and how it fared, I think I would have to say that the remake had more of a race to fame than the original It series. I mean, we wouldn't be here if there wasn't an original It series. We gotta start somewhere, but it was something that just was known for Tim Curry. Basically just Tim Curry, if you think about it. But getting to see, anybody else come through, no one really I don't really hear any references or cross-examination stuff. Everyone just got lucky in their moments. But comparing it to the remake, it has been hard to escape any of those kids today. The kids are stronger in this one. I really hate to say it because in the TV one, I think the kids were fine. but this group, like, they were like the Stranger Things kids all over again. It probably helps that you do have a Stranger Things kid in there. A huge chunk of them now live in very interesting projects, and it wouldn't be if they weren't giving a performance of a lifetime in it. Every one of those kids fit the vibe of it in such a great way that didn't feel like it was underwhelming, but it wasn't trying to take away what the original childhood essences was like in the It's series. It just became its own embodiment of the story that everyone looks for, and there's been so much praise to how much these kids have done to keep this story depicted the way that it should be, especially when it comes to the kids. And originally, as a little additive, the Duffer Brothers were supposed to direct the It series, but they ended up backing out until the other director came through. But you still have 1/4 of Stranger Things coming through that still made its way there, which does give it that childhood charm, since you watched a show that does have to deal with kids going up against an enigmatic being that no one can really explain, just like these kids are going up against an enigmatic being that no one can really understand or explain. How funny. Anyway, back on topic. It's no offense to the original kids, but these ones are a lot stronger, and those kids, their careers have taken off. A lot of them have gotten great TV shows coming through and great movie deals. Oh my gosh, like literal stars were born from those scares that Karen here. And by that definition, I also have to say that the adults are also better in the remake than they were in the original. I've seen the original enough times, and I do like it, and I do like some of the actors in there, besides Andy Dick. But seeing the way that the adults were carefully crafted to look like their counterparts, and if you look at some of those kids and their counterparts as adults, it's like, did one of you get plastic surgery? Because one of you does not look like the other one. And it's kind of impossible to find such a likeness. But these kids in the remake were able to find adult actors that looked the most like them and could act the most like them, that felt like you watch these kids grow up in the span of 2 films. But there is one thing that I will give the original It series, as much as it feels like I've been ragging on it. It definitely did not have as much as controversy as the films did. When you really look at them, that one, it didn't really have anything controversial except for, I don't know, Andy Dick existing in the original miniseries. Then again, that's kind of more of a minor complaint and not a controversy, but during the production of the It series, it did make some changes that didn't go over very well, whereas the original one just played its cards just right enough to make the story work for what they could get away with in the 90s. Like I said, the original version has its own torch, just like how this version has aged enough to have its own torch, and they both work in their own way. Despite being in 2 different eras, they both have done a good job in their own way. This is my last little compare and contrast, and this is going to sound like such a jab, but the introductory of Pennywise was done better in the remake than it was in the original. And I feel mean for saying that, and please don't come after me. But because of the fact that there was a longer amount of time and you could show something that you could not show on television, it gives Pennywise's introduction the terrifying example that needed to be seen. Having the original show Pennywise and what he's doing, and it just looks so, fun, inviting, but he also way too bright in that sewer. And when he goes after Georgie, it's up to you to figure out what happened to him next. All you know is that there's teeth coming at the screen, and that's the last you see of Georgie. Georgie's officially a kid's meal at that point to Pennywise. But then you have the version in 2017 where you had a longer amount of time to be uncomfortable with this being that's doing everything he can to lure this child. And it's not that hard, but kids are also very in tune to what their family thinks. Like, oh no, my brother will want me home. And it was so easy for Pennywise to have to say, well, don't you want to come down here and have all the things you've ever wanted? And it was like hook, line, and sinker. Having the amount of time be longer to get to that. It pays off, and in such a horrifyingly way. When I was in the theater and I watched Georgie's arm no longer be part of his body, I was like, well, damn! It 2017 said, hold my beer! When I went to go see this in the theater with a former friend of mine, I had such a white knuckle grip on her arm. There was nothing you could do to detach me from while I watched that terror. There was no way to look away from it. That did a lot more than what we saw and cut away from in the 90 version. And having this poor kid be literally dragged to the sewer before it was up to our imagination. You don't get to have an imagination for this one. You see flat out the horror of this child being another victim of Pennywise. But this is your introduction to how that body count has increased. So I want to view these two films that exist in the same story separately, because a lot of people do feel they like these series separately more than together, which is funny considering it's an entire series that's made to be one whole story told in a Kill Bill style of being sliced into two. Which kind of feels appropriate considering you do need a proper split to digest what the Losers Club has went through and how it followed them into their adulthood. Whew, it's crazy. The first film, it feels like what childhood is supposed to be depicted like. There's been many people that have gone back to watch this movie and felt that the biggest takeaway is how you felt that this was a childhood movie. Many reviewers have cited how this feels like what childhood is supposed to look like as a definition. I mean, not everyone went jumping in the lake and whatever, but the camaraderie between the Losers Club, I mean, that is the reason why you fall in love with stories. As stark and dark as Stephen King's stories are, you do know why there's a reason Stand By Me and Shawshank Redemption are also equally as loved outside of King's horror work, because the man knows how to write a good story. And even though these kids go through hell, they go through hell together. And they get through it the best they can, knowing it's all going to end with them together no matter what. Well, not all of them, but you get what I mean. When you first saw the kids in the original It series, not to make compare and contrast again, but because it's so quick, you don't really get to get too established with these kids before Pennywise has to go scare the fuck out of you. But in this one, it does take a little bit more time that we needed to bring these kids together and feel established and know who they all are, especially if you've never digested the Stephen King book or its miniseries. The way these kids interact with each other with the most perfect chemistry you could ask for to depict a childhood film. It hits the nail. Like, it makes you love these kids and be absolutely terrified knowing these precious little jelly beans are going to be hunted by a fucking clown. Anytime that I have a conversation with anybody about movies, and if we happen to go on the topic of Stephen King and discuss the Pennywise movies, that's what I call them, I'm still asked if the famous child orgy scene exists in the movie, which, one, of course it's not. No, and no. There's no way that could have ever happened, but when you get a full-on adaptation, you think it's going to deliver things, but thankfully this thing was smart enough to not do the thing that doesn't sound like should exist in the first place. And that's what people really got into reading Pennywise, was like trying to find that scene. There are some people that still say the book is absolutely worth it, but hearing child orgy is not exactly something that I'm going to be comfortable with if I ever read the book. But I'm just glad that the adaptation chose to do a different route to referencing its original source material, and that was the ending. In It Chapter 1, when Bill picks up a turtle, that is a reference to what originally brought down Pennywise. A turtle. A turtle, yes. Again, haven't read the book, But it has been talked about what the real killer of Pennywise is, and of all the different adaptations, there's going to be 3 different ways to kill Pennywise, and they're all just weird in their own way. But they exist here. They just do. But these kids have been going through a very rough time. They did not need the threat of Pennywise. And when you see their lives outside of Pennywise, even before they all got affected when Bill's brother became a kid's meal to Pennywise, no one was asking for more trouble in their life. Like, it really upped the ante knowing these kids were about to have a life 10 times worse than the one that they were living. Like Beverly. Like poor Beverly and her father, and the unhealthy way he has not moved on from his wife. And you can read between the lines. I know that Beverly has a very horrible life with her father, but there's still something that makes her be there, that makes her character stronger, but still, knowing the abuse, it's very tough. However, I hate to do this again for compare and contrast. In the original series, you knew that there was something going on with Beverly. However, you don't get enough time to really digest the entirety of what's going on. And when you do, it's like you're still stuck knowing everyone's lives that you're going to be seeing is going to get worse and worse and worse and worse with the updated takes on their lives. It's every flavor of crazy. I remember the blood balloon that happened in the original, and I was like, yeah, whatever. And, you know, that blood balloon scene said, let's turn it up like by 1,000. When Beverly goes through that blood bathroom fiasco, and of course she's the only one that can see it, the amount of terror that you have to go through, and then it's met with the compassion of the Losers Club that come in to help her. I mean, there are some very dark moments, but the fact that they're all there for each other, I mean, damn, I can see why people go through all the Pennywise scares just to get to these moments. It's worth it. A lot of these kids went through it rough and had their lives spit back at them by Pennywise, and knowing the life that they were introduced to, it only could tell you that it was going to be reflected in such harsh ways. No one wants to have their life spit back at them, but having a Pennywise twisted reality of your own hell spit back at you? Oh man, yikes. It's a good thing these kids stuck together. But then there was It Chapter 2, which, right off the bat, rubbed people the wrong way. When I first heard about It Chapter 2 coming out, the first thing that came with it was controversy. And I'm like, how? The first one was so good. And that kid's orgy scene is definitely not in there, so what exactly is the problem? Well, it was the gay characters. So when I saw the movie and I put in those criticisms that I heard, I couldn't find the criticisms that I heard. I had heard that there's something about a gay couple and it rubbed people the wrong way. Well, the gay couple I saw in the movie was very loving, helped a small child, and it was a tragedy. One was, unfortunately, a victim of Pennywise, and the other one a permanent victim of trauma by Pennywise. So what's the problem? I was expecting something that happened with their characters, and there's nothing to see there. Since it's been 7 years, I wanted to revisit this former accusation towards the film by talking about it with one of the strongest LGBTQIA allies I know, my buddy Kavin. Because I had some mixed thoughts about this, and I don't want to mess this up, so I knew exactly that Kavin was the guy to go to for this. So I asked him, did you feel that this was unnecessary or that their sexuality had nothing to do with them being victims of Pennywise? And this is what he said, and I really enjoy it. Stephen King himself is not known to be homophobic, so I don't take it as having malicious intent. I think it was just meant to have realistic representation. Gay couples are also going to be victims in horror scenarios, and I think it was put in there just for that reason. I didn't read into it as they're gay, so they're gonna die, because plenty of straight people die too. A lot of people think that representation is really only important in everyday experiences, which is true to an extent. But I think it's important to have representation in every possible scenario as well, because that would also be the reality. Most horror, monster, or slasher aren't going to care about your orientation. The only time I've ever seen a slasher really spare somebody was Jason, because he explicitly did not kill children, but that had nothing to do with the orientations of the children. So I think it's realistic to presume that a gay couple is going to get murdered if there is a raving lunatic on the loose, because it's very possible. And there's one last quote from Kavin that I want to make. But with them being killed, it sort of encapsulates the concept of horror where no one is safe. And that is the whole point. No one is safe. Pennywise does not care what sexual orientation someone has. Everyone is fair game. Children are easier, but he's not exactly too picky about what ends up on his platter. It is an unfortunate norm, but look at this too. They're in a small town. Of course, an openly gay couple is going to get picked on by bigots that don't want to see more beyond their horizons. That is also an unfortunate norm of life that's just depicted. That's just normal. But that was seen as so unnecessary, even though that is actually a normalcy. And it's a Stephen King story about childhood. Of course he's going to put something about bullies in there. It's just a more updated take on it. So then the kids grow up in It Chapter 2, and I have to say, and like I've been saying, the counterparts in It Chapter 2 are the most uncanny. The uncanniness almost matches the casting of Frasier and Niles in Frasier. The fact that the kids got to choose who played them, I think those kids need to be future casting directors because they made this cast to perfection. When the trailer for It Chapter 2 played and they showed what was basically the last scene of the whole damn movie, from the window to them and getting to see that counterpart reflection, man, that had me hyped to see what they were going to do, knowing that I still see the same kids all grown up as the way it's supposed to be. Everybody from Jessica Chastain, James McAvoy, Bill Hader, Isaiah Mustafa, Jay Ryan, James Ransone, Andy Bean. They were absolutely perfect as the Losers Club all grown up. But also, on another little additional note about the cast, I loved Bill Hader in this movie. I had kind of wondered when the guy was going to finally get himself involved in a horror film, and if it had to be a horror film, it would have to be one that would be closest to his comedic personality, because, you know, Richie's such a jokester. It worked so flawlessly from Finn Wolfhard to Bill Hader. And the fact that those two got along so great, Bill Hader was just like this gem from what I see on the pictures, between him interacting with everybody. But this also gave Bill Skarsgård a bit of a relief, as I found out, because in the first movie, he does a great job with the kids and asking them, like, hey, are you all right? Are you okay? You know, him being a dad himself, he can't see a child in pain. But since it's adult, he was like, here we go. Bill Skarsgård is absolutely phenomenal in what he does as an actor, to the point that he even, like I said, had to retire from the horror genre to protect his mental health. And it's really lovely that he still cared for the little kid's mental health while maintaining his character. But I'm sure he felt fucking relieved when he could finally just get to scare the shit out of people and not have to worry too hard about it. I will say also that I do enjoy It Chapter 2 more than I enjoyed It Chapter 1. Even though I love the way the kids are introduced, but the whole thing about a childhood story is watching them grow up and get to see who they want to be eventually. And the little kids are not lost. You still see them in flashbacks, which is lovely. But I really vibed with the adult storyline and how it was just a little bit longer and stronger than the original here. Okay, I said I wasn't going to do too much compare and contrast to the original It, but it just kind of speaks for itself. But this does depict how it is truly like to grow up and know that not everyone comes with you on the same path. Some people do end up making better choices, and some people end up making terrible choices, and sometimes people have a great life with still shit going on. And the thing that the Losers kid still has in common all these years is that they're still miserable. Despite the fact that Bill is a successful screenwriter for horror movies, things still were great, but not great on the inside. Same thing with Beverly. Beverly is still around abusive men that she eventually leaves. It's not great, but she's still going through it on the inside. Richie is a successful comedian, just like the counterpart that plays him, but Richie is still going through very closeted issues on the inside. And then there's Eddie, who is still living in the shadow of his mother's concern, still on the inside. There's Ben, who despite having a massive glow up, is still dealing with shit on the inside. And of course, Stanley's fate is a spoiler and a plot developer. If you've seen it, then you know what I'm talking about. And then Mike, despite becoming a police officer, still dealing with things on the inside and despite all of their personal trauma that's followed them into their adulthood, the thing that still keeps them all together, and unfortunately still causes a majority of their problems, is Pennywise. Now here comes the most divisive part in the entire series, and this is a spoiler alert if you have never seen It Chapter 1 or Chapter 2. The death of Pennywise. So I'm not a major fan of the It series, but I've always respected it. But I have definitely followed its endings, and I was wondering, it's not gonna be a turtle or a giant spider in the end, right? I did not count on this being kind of a weird mixture of the two. And of course, with this being cinematic, it can go a little bit bigger than the Rent-A-Spider thing that was going on in the 90s version. They just kind of threw rocks at it, and then that just, saved the day, and it was defeated. Rocks! That was the weapon that killed them. They all had their own unique weapon to harm Pennywise. That felt like a nice full circle moment to get back at the monster in their childhood. I felt like that was fitting. But him shrinking like a baby in his little arms, just doing that thing like Adam Driver in that one part of the baby on the airplane scene in SNL. That was a little out there, but, it wasn't the giant turtle, but it was still an ending in my opinion. Like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of this series, so I can't have that much of a opinion. I just have the stuff that I've known, and I think it works for what it does, even though if it doesn't work for everybody. And that's okay, because there's still plenty of moments to enjoy from this. So normally I have an ending for these things, but I'd like to let someone speak that loves this movie and even its sequel more than me. And that is my best friend Jenna, who's been on the show before in my recaps episode of Yellow Jackets that she pretty much saved, and I wanted her to give her thoughts about it, and here we go.
It is one of my favorite movies of all time, not just horror, because it's something about the camaraderie of this group of kids trying to take down this great evil, and they managed to do it without making it corny or sappy or cheesy. That on top of the CGI, which I thought was very well done, and Bill Skarsgård's performance is just, the movie just blows my mind every time. I just absolutely love it as a horror movie and just as a movie in general. I watch it probably once or twice a month. Usually I watch Chapter 2 the next day. It's become one of my comfort movies, and all the kids did such a great job, and they're all so cute. The way that they battle together is just amazing to me, and it's just one of my favorite movies.
That was very well said. I think that sums up the It series in a nutshell. So for my tiny little ending spiel that I was thinking about with it, despite all the different changes that came to the series, it's still a stellar remake. Even Stephen King went on to say, I wasn't prepared for how good it really was. Someone who knew his material inside and out was not displeased with what happened with his story. And that is a rare stamp of approval from this man that has a hard time working with different people to get his vision. That's gotta speak for something if the predecessor is not angry about what happened and heck even got to enjoy a cameo in the movie. Despite its changes, all great pieces have something that we're not going to agree with, or we're not gonna really see too much of the changes that we wouldn't see associated. But it still did a valiant job, more than some remakes get credit for these days. Like Jenna said, this was a story about kids fighting evil. You watch them literally face their fears in ways that we can't even fathom or imagine. This two-parter story has ignited people in so many ways that I've seen over the years. It's inspired so many people to recreate the makeup. It has lived as comfort films for many people. I mean, hell, this even led to the further installation of having Bill Skarsgård and Stephen King productions. And this all came from something that was just a remake, and now it's more than just a remake. So what can I say? Stephen King just knows how to make people float, doesn't he? So, with that wrapped up, let's find out what the next episode is going to be on the Stephen King Halloween series. Alright, so I got my little Stephen King selection jar right here, and let's find out what the third episode is going to be, guys. Because we had The Stand, and then we had it. This could go one of those directions. Okay, let's see here. Ah! Okay, well. Man. What? Oh, man. Well, I guess this episode's going to the dogs, because the next episode's gonna be Cujo. Alrighty, well, as I prepare for that doghouse of an episode, you can catch up with me in between uploads. You can find me on my Instagram at the Queen of the Screen. And if you're looking for an easier way to listen to your Media Queen, I am also available on Spotify, and I'm available on YouTube. Alright, that is going to be a wrap for your Screen Queen, so always remember to stay out of the sewers, because you never know when some space killer clown from outer space is going to come after you. And have a safe and happy fall, everyone. This is your Screen Queen, signing off. Bye-bye!